Daniel Etim clears air after fans accuse him of gossiping about Maurice and Sonia. Hello my wonderful family on YouTube. Welcome back to the hottest corner of gist where we know they hide mouth. Today's story go blow your mind, but before I drop this hot pepper gist, I beg smash that like button and subscribe, because this one sweet like sugar. You know that sinking feeling when your phone starts buzzing non-stop and you just know something's gone horribly wrong. That heart-dropping moment when you realize your name is trending on social media, but not for anything you actually did. Well, Daniel Etim woke up to exactly that nightmare scenario, except instead of spilling coffee on his shirt or accidentally liking an excess photo from 2019, he was being dragged through the digital mud for allegedly running his mouth about two of the most beloved people in the entertainment circle. Maurice and Sonia. Yes, those Maurice and Sonia. The couple everyone adores, the relationship goals that make single people want to throw their phones into the ocean, and apparently, according to an army of very angry fans, Daniel had been backstage serving up their business like it was afternoon tea at a gossip convention. But here's where things get interesting, because Daniel swears on everything he holds dear that he never said a single word about them. Not one syllable. Not even a whisper. So how did we get here? How did a man who claims complete innocence end up at the center of a social media firestorm that had fans ready to cancel him faster than you can say unfollow? The whole situation exploded when screenshots started circulating online, allegedly showing messages where Daniel had supposedly spilled some serious tea about Maurice and Sonia's relationship. We're talking the kind of juicy details that would make even the most dedicated gossip blogger blush. The screenshots spread like wildfire, jumping from WhatsApp groups to Twitter threads to Instagram stories, multiplying and mutating with each share until half the internet was convinced that Daniel had committed the ultimate betrayal. Friends were unfollowing, fans were writing dissertation-length threads about loyalty and trust, and somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, Daniel himself was probably wondering if he'd accidentally sleepwalked into an alternate universe where he'd actually done what everyone said he did. The comment section under his post turned into a war zone, with people demanding apologies, explanations, and in some cases, his complete disappearance from public life. It got so intense that even people who didn't know who Maurice and Sonia were started chiming in with their opinions, because apparently, everyone's an expert on drama they know nothing about. But Daniel wasn't about to let his reputation get dragged through the mud without putting up a fight. In a move that surprised absolutely no one who actually knows him, he decided to address the situation head-on rather than hiding behind a carefully crafted PR statement or pretending the whole thing wasn't happening. He went live on Instagram, and you could see it written all over his face, that mixture of frustration, confusion, and genuine hurt that comes from being accused of something you didn't do. His voice had that slight edge to it, the kind you get when you're trying really hard to stay calm but inside you're screaming into the void. He started by acknowledging the elephant in the room, because let's face it, there was no point in dancing around the issue when half his followers were probably tuning in just to see him squirm. He looked directly into the camera and said what needed to be said, that he had never, not even once, spoken badly about Maurice and Sonia. Not at a party, not in a private conversation, not even in his own head during one of those moments when you're having imaginary arguments in the shower. The thing is, Daniel and Maurice go way back, like back to the days when they were both struggling to make it in an industry that chews people up and spits them out before breakfast. They shared cramped apartments, split the last of their groceries, and celebrated each other's smallest victories like they were winning Oscars. So the idea that Daniel would suddenly turn around and gossip about Maurice's relationship made about as much sense as a fish trying to climb a tree. But logic doesn't always win in the court of public opinion, especially when there are screenshots involved, because screenshots are treated like gospel truth even though anyone with basic Photoshop skills could fake a conversation between the Pope and Bigfoot if they really wanted to. Daniel explained all of this during his live session, his hands gesturing emphatically as he tried to make people understand that their friendship wasn't some casual acquaintance situation. These were the kind of friends who had each other's Netflix passwords, who could show up at each other's houses unannounced, who'd helped each other through breakups and career setbacks and all the messy bits of life that don't make it onto the highlight reel. Then Daniel dropped the bombshell about where this whole mess actually started, and honestly, if the situation wasn't so serious, it would almost be funny in that absurd way that makes you question everything about how information spreads in the digital age. Apparently, the entire rumor originated from a completely fabricated conversation that someone had created for reasons that remain unclear to this day. It wasn't even based on a real interaction that got twisted or taken out of context. No, this was a full-blown work of fiction, crafted by someone with either too much time on their hands or a serious grudge to settle. The fake messages were designed to look authentic, complete with profile pictures, timestamps, and that casual texting style that makes everything seem legitimate. Whoever created them had clearly done their homework, studying how Daniel actually communicates, mimicking his speech patterns well enough to fool people who didn't know him intimately. But here's the kicker: Daniel had never even had a conversation with the person whose name appeared on the other end of those screenshots. They'd never texted, never met, never exchanged so much as a casual emoji reaction on a mutual friend's post. As Daniel continued explaining, you could hear the exhaustion in his voice, that bone-deep weariness that comes from having to defend yourself against accusations that have no basis in reality. He talked about how he'd first learned about the screenshots when his phone started melting from all the notifications, messages from concerned friends asking if he'd lost his mind, tags in posts where people were calling him every name under the sun, and DMs from strangers who felt personally betrayed even though they'd never met him. His first reaction, he admitted, was complete bewilderment, that disorienting confusion when you're accused of something and you genuinely have no idea what people are talking about. He'd scrolled through the screenshots with increasing disbelief, reading words he'd supposedly written but had absolutely no memory of typing, watching his supposed betrayal unfold in a conversation that existed only in someone's imagination. It's the kind of experience that makes you feel like you're losing your grip on reality, questioning your own memory and wondering if maybe you had said something and somehow completely blocked it out, even though deep down you know that's impossible. The impact on his relationship with Maurice and Sonia was something Daniel seemed particularly emotional about, and rightfully so. He talked about how he'd immediately reached out to them the moment he saw the screenshots, his fingers probably fumbling over his phone keyboard as he tried to compose a message that would adequately express his horror at the situation. He'd called Maurice directly, and apparently that conversation was both relieving and heartbreaking in equal measure. Maurice, to his credit, had already dismissed the rumors as obvious fabrication because he knew Daniel too well to believe he'd ever do something like that. But the fact that Daniel even had to make that call, had to reassure his friend that he hadn't betrayed him, had to defend his character against anonymous accusations, that was what really stung. It's one thing when strangers on the internet doubt you, but when your close friends are put in a position where they even have to consider whether the accusations might be true, even for a split second, that's a different kind of pain entirely. Sonia had apparently been equally supportive, which Daniel mentioned with visible gratitude, his voice softening when he talked about her response to the whole situation. She'd posted her own statement, brief but powerful, essentially telling everyone to calm down and stop believing everything they see online just because it comes with a screenshot attached. Her message was the social media equivalent of a reality check, reminding people that digital manipulation is easier than ever and that maybe, just maybe, they should verify information before joining a virtual lynch mob. But even with Maurice and Sonia's support, the damage was already spreading like a virus through Daniel's professional and personal life. He talked about opportunities that suddenly went quiet, collaborations that were mysteriously put on hold, and that awful feeling of walking into a room and knowing that people are looking at you differently, whispering behind their hands, wondering if there's truth to what they heard even though they'd never say it to your face. What really seemed to frustrate Daniel, and honestly who could blame him, was the speed at which people had been willing to believe the worst without asking a single question or waiting for his side of the story. He pointed out, with more than a hint of exasperation, that in our rush to consume drama and participate in the collective outrage that social media thrives on, we've completely abandoned basic principles like giving people the benefit of the doubt or, revolutionary concept here, actually verifying information before spreading it. The screenshots had been shared thousands of times within hours, co-tweeted with angry commentary, turned into memes and reaction videos, all before Daniel even knew they existed. By the time he woke up that morning, his supposed betrayal was already yesterday's news being replaced by today's scandal, except the damage to his reputation was very much still fresh and raw. It's the digital age equivalent of being convicted in the court of public opinion before you even know you're on trial, with no defense attorney, no chance to present evidence, and a jury that's already made up its mind based on a headline. Daniel also addressed something that a lot of people probably weren't thinking about in their rush to judgment, the psychological toll of being at the center of a false accusation that's playing out in front of thousands of people. He talked about the anxiety of checking his phone, not knowing what fresh horror awaited him with each notification. The sleepless nights spent mentally replaying every conversation he'd ever had, searching for something, anything, that might have been twisted into this narrative. The weird paranoia that sets in when you start wondering who could have done this and why, cycling through people you know, trying to figure out who might hate you enough to go to this lengths. It's the kind of stress that most people only experience in their worst nightmares, except Daniel was living it in real time with a front-row audience of critics and armchair detectives who felt entitled to dissect every aspect of his life. He mentioned having panic attacks, that chest-tightening, breath-stealing feeling that something terrible is happening and you're powerless to stop it, watching helplessly as a fabricated version of yourself takes on a life of its own in the collective consciousness of the internet. The detective work that followed was something Daniel described with a mixture of gratitude and amazement, because apparently, not everyone on the internet is content with accepting screenshots at face value. A group of tech-savvy followers, the kind of people who probably should be working for intelligence agencies with their investigative skills, started pulling apart those screenshots like they were analyzing the Zapruder film. They noticed inconsistencies in the formatting, timestamp anomalies that didn't match up with how the messaging platform actually works, and subtle differences in the way Daniel's supposed messages were written compared to his actual communication style. It was like watching a real-time digital forensics investigation unfold on Twitter threads and Reddit posts, with people circling details in red, comparing screenshots pixel by pixel, and eventually building a pretty convincing case that the whole thing was fabricated. One particularly dedicated sleuth even managed to identify the app that was likely used to create the fake conversation, complete with a tutorial on how easy it is to manufacture convincing-looking messages that never actually happened. As more evidence of manipulation came to light, the tide slowly started to turn, though Daniel noted with some bitterness that it turned a lot slower than it had rushed in to condemn him in the first place. Funny how that works, isn't it? People are lightning fast to grab their pitchforks and join the mob, but when it comes to putting those pitchforks down and admitting they might have been wrong, suddenly everyone's moving in slow motion. The apologies, when they came, were often half-hearted or buried in the replies section where nobody would see them, not splashed across timelines with the same urgency as the accusations had been. Some people deleted their angry posts without acknowledging they'd ever made them, engaging in that convenient form of digital amnesia that lets you participate in destroying someone's reputation and then pretend you were never there when the truth comes out. Daniel didn't seem particularly surprised by this reaction, more wearily resigned to it, like someone who's learned a hard lesson about human nature and the internet's goldfish-like attention span when it comes to corrections and retractions. Throughout all of this chaos, Daniel made a point to thank the people who had stood by him, the friends who reached out privately to offer support, the followers who questioned the screenshots from the beginning, and the complete strangers who dedicated their time to uncovering the truth because they believed that facts should matter more than feelings. He got visibly emotional talking about the messages he'd received from people sharing their own experiences with false accusations and online harassment, creating this unexpected community of solidarity born from shared trauma. It's a club nobody wants to join, but once you're in it, There's something weirdly comforting about knowing you're not alone in having survived the internet's particular brand of mob justice. These weren't just empty platitudes or performative support. These were people who understood the specific kind of violation that comes with having lies told about you to thousands of people simultaneously, watching helplessly as those lies get repeated and embellished and treated as truth despite having no connection to reality whatsoever. Daniel then shifted to talking about Maurice and Sonia themselves, and you could hear the genuine affection in his voice, the kind that comes from real friendship rather than the performative closeness that social media often mistakes for authentic relationships. He described them as not just friends but family, the kind of people who know your worst qualities and stick around anyway, who've seen you at your lowest and celebrated you at your highest. He talked about memories they'd shared, inside jokes that probably made no sense to anyone else, and the way their friendship had evolved over the years from struggling newcomers to established figures in their respective fields. The idea that he would jeopardize that friendship for what, exactly? Some momentary satisfaction from spreading gossip. The chance to feel important by sharing information that wasn't his to share. It made absolutely no sense when you actually thought about it, but then again, mob mentality rarely stops to think about logic when there's drama to be consumed and judgment to be passed. The conversation eventually turned to the broader implications of what had happened, because this wasn't just about Daniel or Maurice and Sonia. This was about a culture that's become so addicted to drama and scandal that we've stopped caring whether the drama is real or manufactured. Daniel pointed out that whoever created those fake screenshots knew exactly what they were doing, understood the mechanics of how outrage spreads online, and weaponized that knowledge to cause maximum damage to his reputation. It's a sobering reminder that in the digital age, anyone with basic technical skills and malicious intent can create a crisis in someone else's life from the comfort of their bedroom. The tools to fabricate evidence are freely available. The platforms to spread misinformation are already built and waiting, and the audience eager to believe the worst about people is always online, scrolling, ready to jump on the next scandal without pausing to question whether it's actually real. We've created a perfect ecosystem for character assassination, and we are all complicit in maintaining it every time we share something inflammatory without verifying it first. Daniel also acknowledged his own naivety in thinking that his reputation and relationships would somehow protect him from this kind of attack, that people who knew him would automatically dismiss such accusations as absurd. It's a painful lesson in the limitations of personal brand and the fragility of public perception, discovering that years of building trust and maintaining integrity can be undermined in hours by a convincing lie and a critical mass of people willing to believe it. He talked about having to rebuild not just his public image but his own sense of security, that fundamental belief that if you're a good person and treat people well, you'll be insulated from this kind of malicious nonsense. Spoiler alert, you won't be, because in the attention economy, truth is often less important than engagement, and a scandalous lie will always spread faster than a boring correction. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's the reality we're all navigating in this weird digital landscape where everyone's a publisher and nobody's an editor. The technical aspect of how the fake screenshots were created fascinated Daniel in a morbid kind of way, the same way you might be grimly interested in the mechanics of how a car accident happened even as you're being loaded into the ambulance. He'd done research after the fact, probably during one of those sleepless nights, learning about all the apps and websites that exist specifically to create fake social media conversations, text message exchanges, even email threads that look identical to the real thing. These tools aren't exactly hidden in the dark corners of the internet either. They're readily available, often free, and marketed as harmless fun for creating jokes or pranks. But as Daniel's experience proved, they are also perfect weapons for anyone looking to ruin someone's reputation with minimal effort and maximum plausible deniability. The person who created the fake screenshots probably spent less time making them than you spent choosing what to watch on Netflix, yet the consequences rippled through Daniel's life for weeks, affecting his mental health, his professional opportunities, and his relationships with people he cared about. One of the more frustrating aspects of the whole ordeal, which Daniel talked about with barely contained irritation, was the number of people who continued to believe the screenshots even after they'd been thoroughly debunked. Some people had apparently become so invested in the narrative, so attached to their outrage and their role in calling out bad behavior, that they couldn't let it go even when presented with clear evidence that they'd been wrong. They'd retreat into vague statements about there being no smoke without fire, or suggesting that maybe the specific screenshots were fake, but surely Daniel must have done something to deserve this kind of attack, engaging in the kind of circular reasoning that protects their ego from having to admit they'd participated in a digital lynch mob based on fabricated evidence. It's the psychological equivalent of doubling down on a bad bet, where admitting you were wrong feels worse than continuing to believe something you know isn't true, and Daniel had to watch this play out in real time among people he'd considered friends or at least friendly acquaintances. The impact on Maurice and Sonia themselves was something Daniel seemed particularly concerned about, perhaps even more than the impact on his own reputation. He talked about how they'd been dragged into this mess through no fault of their own, their private relationship suddenly the subject of public speculation and analysis, with strangers on the internet feeling entitled to dissect their personal lives based on information that didn't even exist. Even though the screenshots were fake, the damage was real, creating awkwardness and requiring explanations and probably making them question who they could trust with actual details about their lives. Daniel expressed genuine regret about this, not because he'd done anything wrong but because he felt responsible simply by being the vector through which this violation of their privacy had occurred. It's a particular kind of guilt, feeling bad about something that was done to you and through you to harm others, even though you had zero control over any of it and were as much a victim as anyone else involved. Looking back on the whole experience, Daniel seemed to have developed a more cynical view of social media and online culture, which honestly is probably healthy even if it's depressing. He talked about being more guarded now, more careful about what he shares and who he trusts, viewing every interaction through a lens of potential manipulation or misuse. It's a sad but understandable evolution, that loss of innocence about the digital spaces we inhabit and the people we share them with. He mentioned screening his DMs more carefully, being suspicious of friend requests from people he doesn't know, and generally approaching online interactions with the kind of wariness that probably should have been there all along but feels especially heavy when it's born from actual trauma rather than abstract caution. The spontaneity and openness that made his social media presence appealing in the first place has been tempered by necessity, replaced with a more calculated approach that protects him but also distances him from the authentic connections that made this whole career path worthwhile in the beginning. But Daniel also talked about unexpected positives that came from the nightmare, because apparently, even rock bottom has silver linings if you look hard enough. The situation revealed who his real friends were, the people who stood by him without needing proof of his innocence, who offered support before asking for explanations, who defended him publicly even when it would have been easier to stay silent and wait to see which way the wind blew. These crisis-forged bonds, he suggested, are actually stronger than relationships formed in easier times, because now he knows exactly who he can count on when things go sideways. He also gained a new appreciation for due process and careful thinking, becoming the kind of person who now pauses before sharing viral content or jumping to conclusions about public controversies, having learned firsthand how quickly misinformation spreads and how much damage it causes. It's like developing an allergy to something after a bad reaction. Now he can't consume or contribute to online drama without experiencing intense discomfort and remembering what it felt like to be on the receiving end. The legal aspect of the situation came up briefly, with Daniel acknowledging that he'd considered pursuing action against whoever created the fake screenshots but ultimately decided the time, energy, and money required would probably exceed whatever satisfaction he'd get from it. It's a calculation a lot of people in similar situations have to make, weighing the desire for justice against the reality of how difficult and expensive it is to hold anonymous internet users accountable for their actions. The person who made the screenshots had likely used a fake account, covered their digital tracks, and could be anywhere in the world, making them practically impossible to identify and prosecute. Even if Daniel managed to figure out who they were, the legal system isn't exactly optimized for dealing with digital defamation and fabricated evidence, often treating it as less serious than physical harm despite the very real consequences for the victims. So instead of pursuing that frustrating path, Daniel chose to invest his energy in rebuilding his reputation and moving forward, which is probably the healthier choice even if it means the perpetrator faces no consequences. The media literacy lesson embedded in this whole disaster is something Daniel emphasized repeatedly, clearly hoping that someone watching or reading would take it to heart and maybe think twice the next time a screenshot goes viral. He basically delivered a masterclass in critical thinking, pointing out all the red flags that should have made people question those screenshots from the beginning. Why would someone screenshot a private conversation and share it publicly? What motivation might they have for doing so? Does the content align with what we know about the people involved? Are there any technical inconsistencies that suggest manipulation? These are basic questions that should be automatic in the digital age but somehow aren't, probably because it's more fun to believe the drama than to be the person asking boring questions about verification and evidence. Daniel's plea was essentially this: be the person asking boring questions, because the alternative is participating in the destruction of someone's reputation based on information that might literally be made up by someone with a grudge and basic Photoshop skills. As the conversation wound down, Daniel's tone shifted from defensive and explanatory to something more reflective and forward-looking, like someone who's been through the ringer but is determined not to let it define him. He talked about his plans moving forward, projects he's working on, and his determination not to let this experience silence him or push him out of spaces he's worked hard to occupy. There was a defiance there, a refusal to give whoever created those screenshots the satisfaction of seeing him retreat or change who he is fundamentally. He acknowledged that he'll probably always be more cautious, that some innocence is lost and can't be recovered, but he's not willing to let fear and suspicion completely reshape his personality or his approach to his career. It's the kind of resilience that comes from surviving something difficult and deciding that it made you stronger rather than letting it break you, even if that strength comes with scars and a more realistic understanding of human nature and the internet's capacity for casual cruelty. So here we are, at the end of this wild ride through accusations, investigations, and revelations, with Daniel's reputation battered but intact and the truth finally catching up with the lie that tried to destroy him. The question now is what we all do with this information, how we let it change the way we interact with viral content and participate in online culture. Daniel's story isn't unique, it's happening to people every day in varying degrees of severity, but it is a particularly clear example of how quickly things can spiral out of control and how much damage can be done before anyone bothers to check if what they are sharing is actually true. The next time you see a screenshot that makes your blood boil, the next time you feel that righteous anger rising up and your finger hovering over the share button, maybe remember Daniel's face during that Instagram live, the exhaustion and hurt and frustration of someone defending themselves against accusations that should never have gained traction in the first place. Maybe ask yourself if you want to be part of the problem or part of the solution, if you want to contribute to a culture that values truth and verification or one that prioritizes speed and engagement over accuracy and fairness. Look, we've all been there, caught up in the momentum of collective outrage, feeling like we're on the right side of something important by calling out bad behavior or standing up for victims. But this situation should be a wake-up call about the dangers of that impulse when it's not tempered by critical thinking and a genuine commitment to truth. Daniel didn't deserve what happened to him, Maurice and Sonia didn't deserve to have their privacy violated and their relationship picked apart based on fabricated evidence. And whoever created those screenshots doesn't deserve to get away with it consequence-free, even though they probably will. The only way to prevent this from happening again, to the next Daniel or the next target of some anonymous person's malicious creativity, is for all of us to do better. Be more skeptical, ask more questions, wait for verification before joining the pile-on, and maybe, just maybe, remember that there are real human beings on the other end of your keyboard warriors. People with feelings and reputations and mental health that can be seriously damaged by our casual participation in their public destruction. So what do you say? Are you ready to be better? Are you willing to be the person who slows down the misinformation train instead of adding coal to the engine? Because if this whole mess taught us anything, it's that we desperately need more people willing to do exactly that. Share your thoughts in the comments, tell us about your own experiences with online misinformation, and let's start a conversation about how we can build a digital culture that values truth over drama and verification over viral engagement. And hey, maybe throw Daniel a follow while you're at it, because after everything he's been through, the man deserves some genuine support from people who actually care about the truth.